Let me ask you something. If someone handed you a check for $30 million tomorrow morning, and I mean literally handed it to you, no strings attached, no taxes yet, just a number with a lot of zeros, what would you do? Most people, without even thinking, say something like, I'd pay off my debt. I'd buy a house. I'd take care of my family. I'd invest the rest and never work again. And they say it with complete confidence. Like it's obvious. Like it's already decided. But here's what actually happens. Within 5 years, nearly 1/3 of lottery winners in the United States have filed for bankruptcy. Not some of them. Not the reckless ones. 1 in 3. And that's not even the full picture, because bankruptcy is just the ones we can count. The ones who quietly burned through everything and never made headlines. Those numbers are even worse. Now before you say, well, they just spent it all on Lamborghinis and mansions, I need you to stop. Because that's the story we tell ourselves. That's the comfortable explanation. The one that lets us sit back and say, I would have been smarter. But the truth is so much more unsettling than that. And it has almost nothing to do with how much you spend. It has everything to do with what happens inside your brain when money shows up faster than your identity can keep up with it. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today. There's a man named Jack Whittaker. If you don't know that name, you should. In December 2001, Jack won the Powerball jackpot, $314.9 million. At the time, it was the largest single-ticket lottery jackpot in American history. He took the lump sum, $113 million after taxes. Now here's what makes Jack's story different from most. Jack wasn't some guy struggling paycheck to paycheck. He was already a successful businessman. He already had a net worth of roughly $17 million before he won. He had systems. He had discipline. He had experience managing money. And within 4 years, he was broke. His granddaughter, whom he adored, died of a drug overdose. His wife divorced him. He told reporters, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he wished he'd torn up the ticket. If Jack Whittaker, a self-made millionaire, couldn't handle it, what does that tell us about the nature of this problem? It tells us this isn't a spending problem. It's a psychology problem. And specifically, it's a condition that researchers have actually named. It's called sudden wealth syndrome. Sudden wealth syndrome isn't a diagnosis you'll find in the DSM, but it's a pattern that licensed therapists and financial psychologists have documented so consistently that it now has its own literature. Dr. Stephen Goldbart, a psychologist in San Francisco who has worked extensively with sudden wealth recipients, describes it as a cluster of psychological responses that hit when someone receives a large, unexpected sum of money. And the core of it is this: your sense of who you are, your identity, was built around a certain financial reality. And when that reality changes overnight, your brain doesn't update automatically. Think about that for a second. You've spent your entire life making decisions as someone with a specific income, a specific social standing, specific limitations. Every habit you have, every relationship you have, every way you think about the future, it was all calibrated for a particular financial world. And then in one moment, that world gets replaced by a completely different one, and your brain is still running the old software. The technical term psychologists use is identity disruption. And what makes it dangerous isn't just the confusion. It's what people do to resolve that confusion. Some people overspend, not because they're reckless, but because spending is the only way they know how to feel connected to the money. It makes it feel real. Others give compulsively, to family, to friends, to anyone who asks, because guilt is overwhelming and generosity feels like a release valve. Others freeze entirely, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong move, and the money just sits there losing value to inflation while they spiral in anxiety. And here's the part that most people never talk about: the relationships. A 2010 study published in the Review of Economics and Statistics found that lottery winners were significantly more likely to go bankrupt within 3 to 5 years compared to non-winners who received smaller windfalls. But what the headline numbers don't capture is the social destruction that happens in the middle. When you win the lottery, or receive a large inheritance, or exit a business, suddenly everyone in your life recalibrates their relationship to you. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but it happens. Cousins you haven't spoken to in 6 years appear. Old friends start tracking your social media. Your brother-in-law has a business idea. Your college roommate needs a loan just to get back on his feet. And because you're already in identity disruption, already uncertain about who you are in this new reality, You become extraordinarily susceptible to social pressure. You say yes to things you shouldn't say yes to. You give money to people who won't use it well, not because you want to, but because you don't yet have the psychological infrastructure to say no without feeling like you're betraying who you are. There's actually a name for this too. Researchers call it the money burden, the psychological weight of knowing that your relationships may no longer be what they appear to be. And that weight, for many people, is genuinely crushing. One of the most striking accounts I've read came from a woman in Florida who won $1.3 million in the early 2000s. She said that within 18 months, she had lent or given money to 17 different family members and friends. She said she didn't do it because she was generous. She did it because every time she tried to say no, the look on their faces made her feel like she was no longer a good person. She equated saying no to money with saying no to love, and she didn't know how to separate those two things. By the time she'd worked through them all, she had roughly $80,000 left of her original winnings. Now let's get into the actual neuroscience for a second, because this is where it gets really interesting. Your brain has a system called the dopamine reward pathway. You've probably heard of dopamine. It's usually described as the feel-good chemical. But that's not quite right. Dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about anticipation. It's the chemical your brain releases when it expects a reward. And it's the engine behind motivation, goal setting, and the satisfaction you feel when you work towards something and get it. Here's the problem with sudden wealth. When money arrives without effort, when there's no goal, no hustle, no years of saving and sacrificing attached to it, the dopamine system doesn't get activated the way it does when you earn something. There's no anticipation because there was no process. And what researchers have found is that without that process, the brain actually struggles to assign value to the money correctly. It's like your brain's pricing mechanism gets broken. Studies on lottery winners have found that many report feeling emotionally flat after their win. Not joyful, not fulfilled, but strangely empty. And that emptiness leads them to seek stimulation elsewhere. Bigger purchases, more social activity, more giving, more risk-taking. They're essentially chasing a dopamine hit that the money itself didn't provide. This is why you see lottery winners buying fleets of cars they never drive, investing in restaurants they know nothing about, throwing parties for people they barely know. They're not being stupid. They're trying to manufacture the feeling of winning that the actual winning never delivered. Dr. Tim Boone, a behavioral economist at the University of Bath, put it this way: sudden wealth recipients often experience what he calls hedonic recalibration failure. Their baseline happiness level, their sense of what normal feels like, shoots up immediately after the windfall, and then the world fails to keep up with it. Everything that used to bring them joy, a nice dinner, a family vacation, a quiet weekend, now feels inadequate. So they have to keep escalating. And now let's talk about the thing that actually destroys the money. Because it's not the spending on luxury goods. That's usually a smaller percentage than people think. The real killer is what financial planners call lifestyle debt. Here's how it works. You win $30 million. You take the lump sum, so after federal taxes, which sit at 37% for the top bracket, and state taxes, which vary but average around 5 to 6%, you're looking at somewhere between $17 and $19 million net, depending on your state. Let's say $18 million. Now you buy a house. Not a crazy house, a nice house. Let's say $2.5 million. That's reasonable, right? But that house has property taxes, in many states. On a $2.5 million home, you're looking at $30,000 to $60,000 per year. It has maintenance. It has insurance. It has utilities. A home at that price level easily costs $100,000 to $150,000 per year just to own. Then you get a second home, maybe a car or two, maybe a boat. Each asset comes with carrying costs, insurance, storage, maintenance, fuel, staff if it's big enough. You're not just buying things. You're buying ongoing expenses. And those expenses don't disappear when the excitement does. This is the trap. Your fixed costs, the baseline of what it costs you just to exist, have now been permanently elevated. And here's the brutal math. If you have $18 million and you're spending 5% of it per year, which sounds conservative, that's $900,000 annually. But if your lifestyle costs have climbed to, say, $1.2 million a year because of all those carrying costs on your assets, you're running a deficit of $300,000 every single year, even with $18 million in the bank. Compound that over 10 years. Factor in investment returns that most people never actually achieve because they make emotional investment decisions, and you can see how the math collapses. Now I want to tell you about something called the wealth identity gap. This is a concept I want you to hold on to because it applies to more than just lottery winners. It applies to anyone who receives money faster than they've developed the mindset to manage it. Your wealth identity is basically the level of wealth your brain considers normal and natural for you. It's shaped by your upbringing, your social circle, your experiences, your financial education. And here's the critical insight. Your brain is always trying to get back to what feels normal. If you grew up working class and suddenly have $20 million, your wealth identity is still working class. And that means you'll either unconsciously self-sabotage back to your comfort zone through bad decisions, overgiving, overspending, or you'll live in chronic anxiety because you don't feel like you belong in your new financial reality. Psychologists call this returning to baseline. It's the same mechanism that explains why people who win money are often just as happy or unhappy a few years later as they were before winning. The famous 1978 study by Brickman, Coates, and Janoff-Bullman out of Northwestern University actually found that major positive events, including lottery wins, had surprisingly little lasting effect on reported happiness levels. People adapted back to where they started. But here's the other side of that coin that nobody talks about. People who build wealth slowly over time don't experience this same collapse. Because as their net worth grows, their wealth identity grows with it. Their decision-making skills develop in proportion to their resources. Their habits, their social circles, their sense of self-worth, it all upgrades gradually, in sync. This is the actual advantage of the slow path, not just the compound interest, the compound identity. So what do you actually do if you come into sudden wealth? Or honestly, even if you're just starting to build wealth from scratch, because these principles apply across the board. The first thing, and this sounds almost absurdly simple, but the data backs it up, is do nothing for 90 days. Seriously, not a single major financial decision. No real estate, no investments, no gifts to family, no quitting your job. Nothing. This isn't laziness. This is deliberate psychological buffer time. You are giving your nervous system space to process the change before your decisions get contaminated by the emotional storm of the moment. Most of the worst financial decisions lottery winners make happen in the first 6 months. The first 90 days are the most dangerous window of all. Put the money somewhere boring, a high-yield savings account, a money market fund, a short-term treasury, and let it sit. Every day that passes without a catastrophic decision is a win. The second thing is to build what I call a financial board of directors before you do anything else. Not your brother who knows about stocks. Not your friend who flipped a house one time. I mean a certified financial planner with a fiduciary duty, meaning they're legally required to act in your interest, a tax attorney, and ideally a financial therapist or a psychologist who specializes in wealth transitions. This isn't an expense. It's the most valuable purchase you can make. Because the decisions you're about to make will have 30-year consequences, and you don't yet have the decision-making framework to navigate them alone. The wealthy don't manage their own money, they build teams. The first thing old money does is institutionalize itself. And there's a reason for that. Third, and this is the psychological work that almost nobody does, but that makes the biggest difference. You need to consciously develop your wealth identity before you start acting on the wealth. That means educating yourself, reading, surrounding yourself with people who have actually built and sustained wealth over time, understanding the language of investing, of taxes, of estate planning. Not because you need to do these things yourself, but because you need to be able to evaluate the people who do them for you. The wealth identity gap is bridged by knowledge and exposure, not by time alone. You can choose to accelerate it. Here's the real takeaway, and I want you to sit with this. Money doesn't change who you are. It amplifies who you are. If you're generous, sudden wealth makes you more generous, sometimes ruinously so. If you're anxious, sudden wealth doesn't fix the anxiety, it supercharges it. If you're impulsive, it hands you the tools to act on every impulse at a scale that destroys you. And this is why the work you do on yourself right now, before you have the money, or in parallel with building it, is not soft, feel-good fluff. It is the most hardcore financial strategy available to you. The people who keep their wealth over generations, the ones who build something that actually lasts, are not the smartest people. They're not the luckiest. They're the ones who built their identity alongside their net worth, who got their psychology right before the money arrived, who had the discipline to be boring when everyone around them wanted them to be exciting. The Vanderbilt family fortune, at its peak, the equivalent of roughly $185 billion in today's dollars, was almost entirely gone within 2 generations. Not because of bad luck, because the wealth arrived before the identity could support it. You don't have to be that story. Whether you're working toward your first $10,000, your first $100,000, or you're genuinely out here playing the lottery every week, the most important investment you can make right now is in understanding your relationship with money. What you believe it means, what you believe you deserve, what you believe about people who have it. Because those beliefs will shape every financial decision you ever make, and they're running in the background whether you're conscious of them or not. Most people wait until after they have money to figure out how to think about money. The ones who win, the ones who actually hold on to it and build something real, figured it out first. So start today. Read one book on financial psychology. Have one honest conversation with yourself about your money story, where it came from, what your parents taught you, what you're afraid of. Take one step toward building the kind of decision-making framework that survives a windfall. Because the secret to never going broke, whether you win the lottery or build your wealth dollar by dollar, has never been about the money itself. It's always been about who you are when the money shows up, and you get to decide who that is. Right now, if this hit different than you expected, drop a comment below. Tell me what surprised you most. And if you know someone who's about to come into some money, or someone who just did and you're worried about them, send them this video. It might be the most useful thing you do for them today.